Подчеркнул, надо усилить сотрудничество в рамках союзного государства.
Сейчас арестуют или нет?
Вас уже задерживают.
The people of Russia have been brainwashed by Vladimir Putin and the Russian oligarchs into believing that war with Ukraine is necessary. Putin has described that capturing Ukraine is essential to Russia because the Ukrainians are neo-Nazis as a way of asserting Russia's power and strength throughout the Middle East and to regain the lost land of the former Soviet Union.
Это неотъемлемая часть нашей собственной истории, культуры, духовного пространства.
All extremely imperialistic and flat-out lies, but nobody in Russia is there to tell Putin that he is wrong. The people of Russia do not share the same media that many of you and I share, where in my country, news outlets are publicly owned, we have access to social media, and we are allowed to speak out against the government. In Russia, though, they have none of that. With this in mind, you have to wonder, 1, do the Russian citizens even believe that going to war with Ukraine is wrong? And 2, if they do believe war is wrong, would they have the power to try and stop Putin and overthrow the Russian government? Well, as always, the answer is, it's complicated. The Russian media is owned by the oligarchy and is told exactly what to say. What is the Russian oligarchy exactly? An oligarchy describes a power system that is led by a small group of people. For Russia specifically, this refers to the group of Russian business people and officials who have gained extreme wealth and power in the years following the collapse of the Soviet Union. The United States has tried limiting the power of these Russian oligarchs with personal sanctions that would freeze the oligarchs' assets and often prevent them from selling or benefiting at all until these sanctions are lifted. Why is it significant that the oligarchs control the Russian media, though? Well, these oligarchs get richer and richer the more they listen to Putin's requests. Putin's requests include providing funds to build the military, direct cash straight to Putin, and having the media say exactly what Putin wants to be fed to the Russian people. This is why the rest of the world sees what is going on in Ukraine as a terrible act of war and aggression by Putin, while what the Russians are seeing is that what is going on in Ukraine is just a, quote, special mission.
Спецоперация.
Специальная военная операция по защите ДНР и ЛНР.
Not only is there just a special mission going on in Ukraine, but the Russians have also been fed a completely wrong geographic description of Ukraine. Here in this map, according to the Russian state media, Ukraine actually only owns the light yellow region. The rest of what is actually owned by Ukraine was just gifts from the past Russian and Soviet leaders. The Russian media also blames this entire war on the United States and other Western countries, referring to those European countries in the NATO alliance.
То, что происходит, вынужденная мера. Ну, просто не оставили никаких шансов поступить иначе.
США навязать Европе войну с Россией.
Безответственные западные политики создают угрозы для нашей страны.
Гарантированно уничтожают США и все страны НАТО в придачу. Путин предупреждал, пугать Россию не надо.
Russia hasn't held back on civilians in Ukraine. Children's hospitals have been bombed, and the number on exactly how many civilians that have been killed in Ukraine is not very well known, but is said to be in the thousands, which is thousands more than what the Russian state media is reporting.
К мирным жителям и городам отношение реально бережное.
Horrifying Russian airstrike.
Seventh day of the invasion.
Countless humanitarian abuses. 10 ordinary citizens standing in a bread line were reportedly killed when Russian soldiers opened fire.
In addition to the blatant lies fed by the Russian state media, Russia is banning some forms of media altogether. Russia has banned Facebook and Instagram because it is obviously much harder to control social media outlets controlled by Americans than it is to control Russia's own news media. Russia is still allowing the Chinese-owned social media app TikTok, shocker, but TikTok users in Russia can only see the Russian-made content. Although this all seems insane, and you wonder how any of the Russian civilians could believe the lies they are being fed day after day, Putin's plan seems to be working. In a recent survey, roughly 60% of Russian respondents reported that tensions in Ukraine are at the fault of the United States and NATO. Unless this number is being faked, it is only a matter of time before Russian civilians as a whole begin questioning their government's actions. As the West has cut off Russia from the global financial system, Russian residents are starting to feel the pain. Russia's currency, the ruble, has seen a historic drop in value. The central bank of Russia has been printing money like crazy to assist the smaller banks as Russian citizens are trying to exchange their rubles for foreign currency that they know will have a more stable value to it. The Russian ruble has had a modest recovery, but it is unlikely to return to anywhere near its pre-war level. Russian oligarchs are having their mansions, private jets, and super yachts all seized by the United States and other European countries. Interest rates have doubled, the stock market has completely closed for historic periods of time, and many Russian civilians could be in danger from NATO countries if any members of NATO decided to interfere. Not to mention, many Russian families are going to start realizing their loved ones have died and aren't coming home from the special operation, given that an estimated more than 14,000 Russian troops have already died in less than a month of fighting. And finally, who knows how long these sanctions will be placed on Russia, limiting their only trade partners to Belarus and China. The situation for Russian citizens is looking dire, and many of them are finally starting to grasp the current reality. So this begs the question, how do Russian citizens, aware of their nation's faults, retaliate in a country where you've seen from the past videos that protesting is completely illegal? One idea that has been tossed around would be a potential military coup, meaning that the military would seek to overthrow the existing government and install a temporary civilian government. The only problem with this is that in nations where coups have historically happened, they have been in very low-income countries that are neither fully democratic or fully autocratic. None of these conditions apply well to Russia, considering they are a very authoritarian government with a firm middle class and haven't seen a coup attempt since the 1990s. Although these circumstances don't fare well for a potential coup, there is reason for Putin to fear a potential military-led overthrow. Wars like Putin's can foster resentment and fear in the ranks of the military, which is precisely the conditions under which we've seen coups happen in other countries. Coups are more likely to happen during conflicts where governments face stronger opponents, suggesting the idea that wartime deaths and defeat really do raise troops of the military together in contention with their own leaders. We have seen exactly just that with the war in Ukraine, given that, as mentioned earlier, a staggering 14,000 plus troops of the Russian military have died already, along with over 400 tanks, over 100 helicopters, 1,400 armored vehicles, and many other substantial military losses. The special operation that was supposedly only going to take a few days has now turned into a much bigger loss for the Russian military and has potentially provided an unusual opportunity or plan to move against their leader, Putin. Putin has been surrounded by a shrinking number of military leaders who pretty much only say yes in response to anything Putin utters. These military officials drafted up the plan to take over Ukraine and expected it to go smoothly, lasting only a couple days with minimal resistance from Ukraine. High-ranking civilian officials in the Russian government have reported being unhappy about the war and its severe economic consequences. You can only imagine the morale of the front-line Russian soldiers knowing their lives are actually at risk to take over a country in which they had a completely flawed perception of.
They said they can't understand what's going on. He said they can't go back because back there they're being shot for retreating, so they advance or surrender.
Here's another video of a Russian soldier calling home to his mom to explain the dark reality of the special operation.
Как бы есть вариант меня обменять как военнопленного. Ты можешь помочь это сделать, если общественность подключится. Ну, ты как бы знаешь, там... А так вот такая вот херня. Подожди, еще раз скажи.
In addition to the military becoming increasingly frustrated with the 1, lies they are being fed, and 2, all the lost lives that they are witnessing not only amongst themselves, but obviously also Ukrainians, there is another reason for a coup potentially in the works. Andrei Solotov, a Russian expert for the Center of European Policy Analysis think tank, has said that Putin is punishing high-ranking officials in the Federal Security Service for the war's early failures. Solotov's sources say that Putin has placed Sergei Beseda, the leader of the Federal Security Service's Foreign Intelligence Branch, under house arrest. This report hasn't been 100% verified, but if true, this leads to another theme where poor performance in wars typically leads to autocrats finding someone to blame. The fear of personal insecurity among high-ranking generals and leaders is another predictor for many coups. That fear of punishment could convince some among Russia's security elite that the best way to protect themselves is to get rid of Putin. With all these potential indicators leading to a coup, they are still very difficult to pull off. Successful military coups are actually generally bloodless, as the leaders of the coup would be unlikely to actually execute an overthrow attempt unless they believe they have an overwhelming support from the armed forces in the capital. Another scenario that could remove Putin from power that is actually more plausible than a military coup would be a revolution amongst the people of Russia. Political scientists have found that non-violent protests are more likely to topple regimes than armed uprisings. And although the Russian government shuts down any thoughts of protests, Russia has actually had a long history of civil resistance movements. Even the Soviet Union was formed by a civilian uprising after the embarrassing loss during World War I. And today, we are seeing many forms of protest across Russia, with nearly 70 different demonstrations in Russia on March 6 alone. These protests are not at the scale yet to where a potential overthrow would be likely, but if the war in Ukraine continues to go poorly for Russia, this could be something to look out for. At the time of me writing this script, on March 18th, 2022, Russia just held a massive rally at a packed stadium in Moscow, where there seems to be a whole lot of proud Russians completely unaware of the true reality.
Do you think it is okay for Russia to bomb Kiev and Kharkiv?
Никто Киев и Харьков не бомбит. Не надо врать.
It will be extremely difficult for Russians who are actually aware of what is going on in Ukraine to warn their fellow citizens of the lies they are being fed each and every day. Until this happens, it is not likely that there would be a revolution against Putin, but as the war drags out longer and longer, the truth could come out. Anyways, if you guys learned something, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click this video right here to learn why there are no other countries choosing to help Ukraine fight Russia.